guys, welcome to a special Wednesday episode of Triggered. And tonight we're going to be doing one show about one thing, because it matters. And I got to see this, up close and personal in court this week. I spent Monday and Tuesday in a courtroom in Provo, Utah. 2 days of testimony. I watched every minute of it from the front row. And I want to walk you through what I saw in that room, because what the state is building and what the defense is trying to hide from you tells you really everything you need to know about the case. And the case in question is obviously the murder of my good friend, Charlie Kirk. And then we've got, the perfect guest for it. Human Events senior editor and host of Human Events Daily, Jack Posobiec. We have Graham Allen as well. And I think Brandon Tatum will join us in a bit too. They were all in that courtroom with me. They saw the same things with their own two eyes. They've been there all week. I had to get back to the East Coast last night. They've been covering it, and every day of the hearing. So we're going to do a deep dive into all of it. So, let's get this message out. So, share this so the facts actually get out. There's been obviously a lot of noise, and some people are very convinced of some stuff that, I didn't see. I wanted to see what was actually put out there, because I think it's important to separate the noise at this point. Guys, remember, if you missed the show here on Rumble, catch us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts. For all the headlines we cover, go check out my news app, MXM News, where you can get the mainstream news without the mainstream bias, because getting to the truth actually matters. And with that, I guess, let's just get right into it. First, understand what this is, guys. Okay, this is a preliminary hearing. This is not the trial. The state's job this week, their only job, is to show the judge enough evidence to establish probable cause. That's the standard. And if he finds it, this case moves forward. It's only decided by the judge. If he does decide that, you get a trial with a jury, where the state can then present even more evidence than what you're seeing and what we saw this week. So in this opening chapter, I'm telling you, again, having sat through 2 days of it, the evidence to me seems even more overwhelming against Tyler Robinson than I ever actually would have thought. Okay, we've seen and heard a lot of other things. Guys, this one, does not seem like the cover-up. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I've been pretty damn conspiratorial on a lot of things. And I think a lot of people, understandably, have been as well, because they've seen the results of those things. They usually end up being right. This one, to me, and I'm vested because Charlie was one of my closest friends for 10 years, does not seem that way. And I want to tell you about, that front row, because I was in it. Erica was there. Kathy and Rob, Charlie's parents, are there. And, every day, they sat through every minute of this. I sat with them. I watched a widow and two grieving parents show more strength in that courtroom than everyone at the defense table combined. Now, the defense did everything they could to keep the cameras out of that courtroom. They lost. The hearing is being live streamed, and the American people get to watch this and see evidence like this, for example.
What are we seeing here, Agent Hall?
That's the vehicle that is believed to belong to Mr. Robinson arriving in the parking garage on campus. And he also is walking with a gait or a limp in this video.
With a gait or what?
A limp.
Okay.
Again, he seems to be having issues walking.
Now what do we see?
So this is Mr. Robinson coming up the stairs of the parking structure. Again, he seems to be having issues walking.
Well, let me ask you this. You believe this is Mr. Robinson returning to campus?
I do, yes.
Okay. And why do you believe it's Mr. Robinson?
The shoes are the same, and the images that we have are from my viewing and seeing Mr. Robinson on the video, it's the same person.
So, important note about that is Tyler Robinson was seen on campus before this. This was right before the shooting. He was seen a few hours earlier wearing shorts and a T-shirt, and he had no limp. they'd say, hey, he was meeting with Turning Point USA people. My understanding is that he went in there to ask questions about what was going on and when. It wasn't like he had a meeting with Turning Point people. There's a difference. And again, I think some of that is getting lost, online in a fairly big way. So then he shows back up. He's got a limp and long, baggy pants on, almost like you'd be hiding a rifle in there. There's also a screwdriver that was found on the rooftop with his DNA on it, almost like maybe you disassembled the rifle. You took the action and the barrel out of the stock, compacted a little bit, could easily fit it down your leg. I mean, that's what I took from this. But by the end of the week, the state plans to call 4 witnesses and admit 40 to 50 exhibits. Day 1, Monday, I'm sitting there as the state calls its first 2 witnesses. Officer Chris Bagley, a former UVU, which is Utah Valley University police officer who was on campus the day Charlie was assassinated, and Agent David Hull, a former State Bureau of Investigation agent. Agent Hull walked through the surveillance picture. Robinson appears on UVO security footage 4 separate times on September 10th, before, during, and after the shooting. He was not a student at the university, another point that a lot of people have not been making. He lived 4.5 hours away. He turned himself in the next day, and Hull confirmed what the medical examiner found. Charlie's cause of death was a homicide, a gunshot wound to the neck. Then, Officer Bagley, the one who climbed up onto the rooftop where they believe the shooting took place immediately after, the roof that the shot essentially came from, it was accessible by a public stairway. You just walk up there, and on that roof, he found a red and black screwdriver and a disturbance in the gravel, markings consistent with someone who is lying in a prone position, how you would most accurately, generally shoot a rifle if you were doing something like that, with a direct line of sight to where Charlie was speaking. And then the state played the video of the moment Charlie was shot. I was in the room when it played. I'm not going to describe it to you. They actually blocked off the scene for most people. We couldn't actually even see it from there. They made sure people covered up their screens so it couldn't get out there. Can't describe it fully, but I did get to watch Judge Graff, a judge who does this for a living, literally visibly shaken by how violent it was. And that probably tells you everything. Check this out. Yeah, that's a pretty brutal reaction. Then came day 2. The defense seemed, pretty lost in the desert for most of it. They wasted hours of the court's time and got really nowhere. And when they weren't wasting time, they were trying to hide things. They fought to keep major pieces of evidence out of the public view. At one point, they actually tried to close the entire hearing to the public. The judge rejected that. And then they spent a big chunk of the day arguing to hide Charlie's Christian faith from the record. Okay, if this is obviously a crime associated with faith, I guess sort of makes it like a hate crime that really helps keep death penalty on the table, which is very clearly what this is, especially when you talk about Tyler Robinson's proclivity towards transgenders and all of the things that Charlie said about his religious beliefs on those issues. When the state finally got back to the floor, Agent Hull walked the court through a never-before-seen video compilation. Security footage stitched together showing Robinson's movement across that campus before, during, and after the assassination. His vehicle, very distinctly, and being able to identify plates and very distinct hubcaps, his vehicle arriving in the morning. Him moving on and off campus all day, stopping to buy Chick-fil-A about 2 hours before the shooting. 2 hours before, calm enough to grab lunch. And then the roof of the Losi Center. Fleeing across it, jumping down, leaving the campus on foot with something that resembled, as according to the witness, a wrapped-up rifle in his hands. On his way up before the shooting, Robinson was walking with a limp. Okay, this is when he magically put on long pants instead of the shorts that he was wearing earlier in the day. The state says that the limp is consistent with a rifle concealed in his pants. After the shooting, the limp is gone. And the most underreported fact, and again, in this entire case, is that Tyler Robinson was not a student at UVU. He lived almost 4 hours away from campus. Okay, now, it's not a crime to be on a campus. People go do these things. Sort of odd, though, that he would return at 12:30 at night near the woods that he fled into with said, rifle-looking satchel earlier in the day. Now, the state also introduced a letter from Pastor David Engelhardt, a TPUSA board member, because the state is arguing Charlie was targeted for exactly who he was, exactly who everyone knew Charlie to be, and his Christian beliefs and what he represented. And again, that matters legally, because if the state can show Robinson targeted Charlie over his beliefs, it supports the victim targeting enhancement, and that keeps the death penalty on the table. The defense fought that tooth and nail. Again, Judge Graff admitted the testimony provisionally. And then the DNA. Okay? FBI analyst Amanda Baker took the stand, and I listened to her lay it out. Robinson's DNA on the screwdriver recovered from that roof, and on the towel wrapped around the rifle recovered in the woods near campus, and a second person's DNA on that towel, Lance Twiggs. Okay, that was Robinson's roommate and romantic partner, the one that was, I guess, transgender, who is believed to be cooperating with the prosecution. Check this out.
Robinson replied, "Why did I do it?" Twiggs said, "Yeah." Robinson explained, "I had enough of his hatred. Some hate cannot be negotiated out. If I'm able to grab my rifle unseen, I will have left no evidence."
So step back and look at what the 2 days built. Surveillance putting him on campus 4 times, a rooftop with a public access stairway, a screwdriver with his DNA on it, prone marks in the gravel with a line of sight to Charlie, a compilation video tracking him from his car to that roof and off it, a limp that shows up with apparently a concealed rifle and disappears when he's carrying the rifle and it's no longer concealed. His DNA again on the tools, and he wasn't a student there. And he drove 3 hours to be there and come back numerous times and come back again at 12:30 a.m. Here is Robinson inside the interrogation room after turning himself in, which is another kind of major point in all of this.
Davis, who are we seeing here?
That's Tyler Robinson.
And although we are watching it on video, what is he wearing at this time?
He's working a dark colored baseball cap with I believe it's like maybe the Hurley symbol on it, like a white symbol on front. It's a burgundy short sleeve shirt with no graphics. It's blue jeans and gray and white tennis shoes. I believe they're Converse style tennis shoes.
Thank you. Was Mr. Robinson, you stated that he was arrested in the early hours of September 12th, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Did he remain in Washington County Sheriff's Office, or was he taken somewhere else?
No, he was transported from there to the Utah County Jail.
Prior to being transported to the Utah County Jail, was any, I guess, personal property taken from him, clothing, anything like that?
The only thing that was, so prior to our arriving to the St. George, to the Washington County Sheriff's Office, his cell phone was seized and taken from his person. But that was the only thing that was taken from at that time.
After he was transported to Utah County Jail, were any personal items taken from him?
Yes, they were.
And what were those?
After a search warrant was granted, his clothing was recovered, along with buccal swabs to collect his DNA and major case prints, which is fingerprints, palm prints, pretty much the entire hand. Those are all collected from him.
So having watched the defense for 2 straight days, they know it, okay? They're not really contesting the evidence. They're fighting over whether you get to see it or not. They can try and seal an exhibit. They can argue for hours about a letter, but they can't erase who Charlie was. And they can't hide what he believed, because he spent literally his whole life saying it out loud on campuses, exactly like that one. Ask me how I know, because I've done about 100 of them with Charlie. And with that, guys, joining me now, Jack Posobiec and Graham Allen. They've been in Provo in that courtroom covering this hearing from the very first gavel. They were there today when I wasn't able to be. So, guys, thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Don, thanks so much. Actually, Graham, believe it or not, he is still at the courthouse right now. I've actually just left there to come here. They were sort of getting some having a strategy session, if you will. And so I ducked out early because I didn't want to leave the triggered audience hanging. So Graham is going to come in if he can get out of that session in time.
No worries. First off, what's the latest on how the court wrapped up today? What's the latest on the Lance Twigg, video? How's the judge addressing? Did that even get out today, or was the stall tactic sort of working? Because I know today was a half day. You didn't start till 1 o'clock, right?
No, that's exactly right. And you're also exactly correct that the stall tactics have indeed been successful for yet another day in a row. So yesterday we got 3 hours of argument as to whether or not DNA is real. I'm on the side that I believe DNA is real. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that yes, genetics and DNA, that's probably all real. But of course we got 3 hours of filibuster yesterday that, maybe it's not, we'll see. Then today, the big piece today, so we did get the one piece of evidence that we got out, which is big, and I'm not going to say that it wasn't. And I'm a little heated because I'm just coming from the courthouse. And,
no,
and
I get it. Like, you take it so
that,
personally. Every time they object to something, you want to just, it's hard.
Yeah, exactly. And so we got the video of Tyler inside the Washington County Sheriff's Department. We've never seen this before. There were some people who had said at one point that there was no video of that. Well, guess what? There is a video. There he is. He's in the Washington County Sheriff's Department right before his interview. Now, we didn't get to hear that interview, but we were told that we were going to hear the interview, not of Tyler Robinson today, but actually an interview with Lance Twiggs. This is the trans boyfriend who held the interview with state and federal law enforcement at a different police department, St. George Police Department nearby. Now, here's what happened in court today. That video didn't come out. Then they said, well, what if we can just play the audio? Then there was an argument that the audio should be redacted. Then they went back and forth about the redactions for so long today that not a single instant of that has come out yet at all. And I just have to say, as somebody who wants transparency, I think this was a huge blow for transparency. I'm livid about this, that we didn't get this evidence that they've had for 10 months, that the defense knows is out there, that they know that this was the boyfriend who had direct information that's obviously relevant to what happened with his boyfriend and what his boyfriend said to him, and they're not letting us see it.
Yeah, that's a big deal because, again, I know you and I, for, believing that, the entire state of Utah, the people involved, believe it to be Tyler Robinson. There's those that don't. I'm of the mindset, like I spent a lot of time, as you have, talking with Charlie, talking on stage with Charlie. I mean, the transgender issue was something that Charlie, hit hard and often. I mean, him and I were talking about these things publicly back in 17 before it was a thing, the men playing in women's sports and this kind of, the fact that the, alleged shooter is obviously, quite trans sympathetic. His boyfriend was trans, or girlfriend, who knows, what it actually is.
Careful. You want to misgender.
Yeah, I don't want to misgender someone. So, but more importantly, understanding the general violence that has come from, the radicalized people within that movement, the number of mass shootings. Frankly, it was what Charlie was literally talking about seconds before he was killed. Literally being, one of the maybe the most violent group in America. I guess maybe he was going to try to make a distinction for gang violence, if I remember the conversation that he was having, literally seconds before he was killed. But it was about this very issue. To me, again, when I saw the rest of the evidence, then you hear, you see the text, you see what he cared about, the shooter. Man, it feels like this is someone like so many other in that community that have acted out and been incredibly violent. Seems really fitting. I don't think you have to be a conspiracy theorist to be like, that's a pretty plausible argument. I think anyone who is conspiratorial and, over the last decade, you have every right to be. so much of this settled a lot of the things that I hadn't talked about in quite some time. How about you?
Yeah, no, I mean, there was a trans shooting at a Catholic school in Minneapolis just 2 weeks prior to this taking place. So, I mean, it was something that was very much in the news. It was a trend that we have been seeing throughout 2025. And unfortunately, it has continued into 2026, where we see school shootings by members of the trans community. Now, in this case, he wasn't trans himself, but the boyfriend was. And so we were going to hear from the trans boyfriend on tape talking about, presumably, his gender identification, these issues, all of these things that obviously Charlie had been talking about for years. And we saw yesterday that the defense, this was the same lawyer, by the way, this Mr. Novak, fought tooth and nail to prevent any of those issues from being brought up. It's, oh, this isn't about politics. This isn't about religion. It's not about gender.
Well, they wanted to make it clear that it wasn't about religion, because I think
the motive.
Well, but they also wanted to separate out religion, because then it sort of adds that, let's call it, think of it like a hate crime statute. If it's but Charlie's politics and his religion were so intertwined. They're one and the same. I mean, you can be, against some of the trans insanity politically, and also be against it based on his very serious Christian faith. And he said both of those things very often.
Right, and so it's very obvious, and even if you didn't even have to know Charlie to know that that's where he got his position when it comes to traditional gender roles and marriage and all of these things. You could just watch him for 5 minutes and say, oh yeah, this guy probably follows the Bible, because he literally talked about it every time he went to speak anywhere in the world. This is what he always said. And so the idea that you could separate, we're not talking about having to have an argument over, which religion is real, or, church and state, or all these things. No. It's a question of, what did Charlie believe, and then what was the motive of the shooter? But it's very clear that the defense is doing everything they can to separate all of that out, to get that out of the public discussion, to get that out of the courtroom, because they know how central it is to the case and how devastating it's going to be when it does eventually make its way in. They are erecting roadblock after roadblock, and it's very frustrating to sit there and know that there's only 2 days left, and there's so many key pieces of evidence that they're just not allowing to be heard in court.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were both in that courtroom Monday and Tuesday. You were there all day today. Can you describe to the audience, what it's like, in that courtroom watching all of this?
So, I mean, I can speak for myself, and I'm sure for you it's similar, though. It's surreal, is just the first word that comes to mind, because you think of something that was so big in terms of Charlie's assassination, and there's something that just changed the world. It's changed the world, for lack of a better term. It literally changed the world. When I think in my head, there's like a couple dates that I think of as, it's like when I got married, when I had kids. And then when Charlie died, it's like the world is just different now. It's just a different world. And yet all of that comes to a head in a room that is actually quite small. I counted today, there's 6 rows or pews, it's kind of like church pews almost, where you're sitting in with the gallery. And so you've got, obviously, you and I were there, and then Charlie's family's right there, his mom and dad, his wife. And then there's one more row, and then Tyler Robinson's family is right there. And right across the bar is like a couple tables, and then there's Tyler Robinson, just a few feet away. And all along, I mean, security obviously everywhere, from Secret Service to local sheriffs and SWAT team, just lining the walls on the left and right, sheriffs up in the front. So, I mean, it was very highly secured, a lot of tension, but then also, that's why I think that when we get to these filibuster tactics and we get to these, I object to every little thing, it's like, it's so frustrating and upsetting, because we just want to hear the case. Yeah. We just want to hear the evidence. Show us the evidence, and then let's decide whether or not that evidence is, it has merit, has value or not. I thought that's what the legal system was all about.
Yeah. We were sitting pretty much right next to each other, on day one. You had a slightly different angle, and I remember when you looked over at me and be like, Tyler Robinson, he's laughing right now. that's not something that someone who's falsely accused of something does, is it? Even months later, you don't sit there, sort of laughing with your lawyer about it. I mean, again, barring the other details of him turning himself in and, the rifle being in the family and all that. And we can get into the rifle because I know one of the things I take a lot of heat on right now is like, could a 30-06 do that? So I think, we can address this, we can address this next. Because, there are those that are, pushing a lot of things that, again, I've listened to all of it over the last few months. I haven't chimed in because I don't, frankly, know what was real, what was conjecture, what was actual evidence. Most of the stuff we saw in the room over the last few days was all new, things I had never seen before. I don't know about yourself, but, what were your thoughts on some of that?
Well, I mean, I do think that, well, first of all, I remember watching the Kyle Rittenhouse case, and I don't remember Kyle Rittenhouse laughing when he was on the stand. I remember him fighting hard to save his life and to save his freedom and to save his future. I'm not seeing that here. I do remember that moment. I'm never going to forget the moment that I saw Tyler Robinson laughing in front of Charlie Kirk's crying widow and Charlie Kirk's crying mother. I'll never forget seeing that. And also the fact that Tyler, even again today, has yet to turn around and not only not acknowledge Charlie's family, he hasn't even acknowledged his own mother and father who have been there every day in the courtroom. So, I've seen other cases, or I've watched other cases where the defendant will turn and, maybe have a gesture to the family or some kind of acknowledgement that they're there for him. Not even 1 second of that today. But, and so that's just something it's very interesting to me. It's very puzzling. Why would someone not do that and just turn their back to their own mother and father? I mean, for me, disappointing my mother, it's like the worst thing you could possibly do, right? And so it's that's mom. You can't let mom down. And so I just don't quite get how you can't acknowledge your own mother. And then, so you mentioned about the evidence, a lot of this, we've been sort of going back and forth, and you get a report here, you get a report there, but I've never seen it just laid out in such a methodical way, which of course the prosecution is trying to do. The defense tries to stop it as much as possible because, they start with the officer who was on the scene. Then they go and he says, I heard the shot. Then he talks about how he was, kind of going around trying to see if he could render aid to students, see if they could arrest somebody. They couldn't, thought I had the one guy, but he was wrong. Then it goes to the next agent. He showed up from the state investigators. So he started canvassing. He started looking at cameras. And then it seemed that, the cameras were
hundreds of hours of video footage, by the way.
Hundreds. And by the way, the footage, you could speak to this too, because you were there, that the footage that we saw in court was so much better quality than the footage that you can see on air right now, that it just hasn't been released yet. This was like crystal clear.
That's what was to me, because again, we hadn't seen these things in the prior months. It was all new. And so, like I said, I've taken heat, frankly, for just being quiet and wanting to see what actually is real and what's not. And again, I understand people being skeptical of a lot these days. I think, man, you're in the same boat as me on that. But again, in seeing it with my own eyes, in seeing it face to face, in watching them lay this out, to me, it became a lot more cut and dry. But let's talk for a second about the case the state is building, right? You got the surveillance, the rooftop, the DNA. You've watched every witness. What should Americans understand about the evidence, again, that maybe isn't getting through? I mean, you obviously just mentioned sort of, the graininess of what we've seen on television versus what we saw in the courtroom definitely paints a slightly different picture. The courtroom being much more clear and much more evident of what it is. But I think for me, it was also a lot of the detail that they went, how do you know it's him? Here's blah, 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 blah. Identified by this. Here's the hubcaps on the car were very distinct, so we could tell. Then we have partial plates that match, the credit cards or whatever it was at, Chick-fil-A. Very different than a lot of the things I'd been hearing over the last 10 months.
Yeah, I mean, in for lack of a better term, it sounds like a murder case. It sounds like a traditional textbook homicide case where you've got lots of pieces of physical evidence, forensic evidence, as well as documentary evidence and electronic evidence. I'm sure, by the way, we may not have gotten there yet, but for example, you mentioned the car. If that car's got a navigation system in it, right? If it's got a GPS or something, well, guess what? They're going to be able to track the car and go exactly where that was. And then they can pair that up with the cell phone and see what the cell phone was doing and where the cell phone. They can even check, FBI as a way to check the elevation of the cell phone. So they could be able to tell, was he going up the staircase? Well, if he had the cell phone on him, was it going up and down? So, I mean, the level of fidelity on this evidence that they have is really very strong. And there's so much more yet to come out that, again, because of these delay tactics, which I'm very frustrated about because I want the transparency. But one thing that they've mentioned this, and it's come up a few times. We haven't seen direct testimony from them yet, but one of the pieces that I just keep coming back to is the fact that, and we got more information on the details of it today, that his mom and dad turned him in.
Yeah.
That, I mean, look,
seems like a big
I'm
deal.
father,
I mean, relative to, again, some of the stuff that's been out
your
there.
Dad, I mean, are you picking up what dad picks up that phone if they're not sure? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Was there a moment across these days?
Your heart goes out to him.
Oh, 100%. I mean, that's why I said going into this, it was, two families ultimately really destroyed by this. Obviously, I think Charlie's weight and the influence that he had with so many people and the lives that he changed, it's a lot more than just his family, but all the people that followed him so well are affected by, but two families just totally ruined and destroyed, with this sick action. But Jack, was there a moment across these days that perhaps hit you harder than others, that hit you hardest, or one where perhaps you felt the whole room, the dynamic of the room change a little bit?
I mean, I guess there's two, if I had to say. First one was just when we walked in on that first day, and they, we're kind of like kind of hustled in almost. It was quick, but then sort of turning, realizing, okay, we're in the front row, and then it dawning on me that, oh my gosh, Tyler Robinson they didn't bring him in the room like in a movie. He was already there. Yeah. And seeing him just a couple of feet away, it sent a chill down my spine. Just there he is. That's the guy. And that for me was, definitely an emotional moment. And I think another one as well, and I've thought about this, was that moment where it was Agent Hull and where he made the identification. You remember that moment where he said, that is the individual. He's seated right between the two lawyers. He described, he's wearing a light suit with a dark tie. I mean, I wasn't expecting that moment to affect me as much as it did, but it really did, because now we've taken all of this evidence, and they're still building more, but you're taking all of this together, and you've got in a courtroom, the state agent pointing directly at the individual who's seated right there with all of the families present, saying, this is the guy I'm identifying right now. And you could see the entire room. There's that shockwave of emotion. I looked over, there were, people obviously in tears at that, people holding hands. I had my rosary out. I saw other people with rosaries out, and it was a big moment. It was a very big moment. And I don't even know if it plays on TV, if the clip, it just doesn't quite have that same emotional weight that I think that we felt when we were there.
No, it's definitely different. It's sort of like the photo, actually, when they had the daylight photo of, the knee and elbow marks where he was lying prone on the roof. But then because the sun was beating down, you sort of lose all the shadows and you can't really see the indentations. And they have the same crime scene preserved, taken at night with light sort of this way. And it's like, oh, wow. Like it's so much more apparent that, someone was there. You could see how the knees were positioned, how the elbows were positioned. It made it, so much more clear to me.
I remember that because the first picture, it just, kind of looked like some gravel on the roof.
Yeah, you can see a little bit of movement, but not as much, and you see it highlighted so much later.
Yeah, actually, in the first one, I actually kind of thought it was like footsteps at first. I thought it was just like a series of footsteps, because I couldn't quite see the distance as well in that shot. And then in the second picture, when they switched it and they used the lighting to really highlight what those markings were, I mean, it looked like a sniper's nest. It just that's exactly what it looked like from what I saw in the military, what I remember from firing in the prone position. That's what that is. That's what it looks like. That's exactly what it looks like.
Now the defense, I watched them burn. You were there too. 4 hours to try to close the entire hearing to the public. And again, watching the Utah State prosecutors, wanting to show everything to the people because again, they're like, it's too damning. It's like, I don't know. There's been a lot of evidence that's been thrown out there that's not actual evidence, but a lot of that noise that's been out there, in every way, shape, and form. I mean, isn't transparency what we actually need? You've now seen more of it than I have. What are they actually trying to do here?
Well, to be fair, we actually didn't get a lot today. We pretty much just got that one picture. So I mean, you're not missing much today because of the way the day went. And honestly, I'm a little hot about that. And I just am. I'll just say it. And the idea that if they're worried about, and the judge did rule on this initially, so I'll give him credit for that. The idea being that is if you're worried about misinformation or you're worried about people taking something out of context or you're worried about being misquoted or something, well, guess what? The best sunlight for that is transparency, literally. So I remember, for example, I saw online, I guess at one point, I haven't been online as much as I usually am, and I saw that someone was saying that, you remember when they were talking about the DNA mixture on the items, it was the towel and the screwdriver, and they were saying that one was the majority contributor, one was the minority contributor. Well, I saw some people online saying that maybe there was I don't know where it started, but maybe somebody got it wrong, and they said that Lance Twiggs was the one who had 89 to 95% DNA match on those items. And I said, whoa, that's exact. I pulled up my notes just to double check, but I said, wait a minute, that's the opposite of what was said in court. What was said in court was that the 89 to 95% on the towel and screwdriver was Tyler Robinson, and Lance Twiggs was also a small partial contribution. But that's something where initially, right after I said that, I could have my guys go, and we pulled that very specific clip right up from the testimony to be able to have the agent there. She's from the FBI lab in Quantico saying specifically that. So if you didn't have the video, or if that hadn't been shown to the wider public, guess what? People could just say whatever they want, and then you won't have something to be able to go back to correct the record. Like so many other things have had to be corrected already in this case. And so that's why I think that fighting for transparency is huge. There was one moment, I believe it was the first moment in the case thus far today, where, and in the hearing, where the Kirk family's representative, Jeff Neiman, actually got up and addressed the court, and it was on that very topic of the Lance Twiggs video, saying that I'll just read from it. The Kirk family wants real transparency. We need the world to hear everything and see everything. We do not want to create doubt, and the family wants full transparency for the world. And look, if you are someone who is skeptical or someone who has questions, and to your point, we've been lied to by so many federal agencies and Dr. Fauci and all the rest for so many years that I get why people would have questions. This is why you want those videos out, and you want the full video out to see not what the government is saying, but what the people who were closest to Tyler Robinson are saying.
Yeah, I think that's a huge distinction, right? Again, I think you're right. People definitely can be skeptical of the government, but your own parents don't turn you in for something you didn't do. To what end? Where does it go from there? That to me, was also very jarring, because I think I tend to look at things with a skeptical eye. With this one, because of there was so much information out there that, again, when I say information, I mean just noise. Some of it may have been real, some of it not even close. A lot of the theories, have clearly been debunked even prior to this thing. And I've taken a lot of heat for not jumping onto every conspiracy that's out there. I just, I think I owe it to Charlie to actually, really want to believe what happened. And this has done a lot to strengthen my confidence towards that end. And again, the thing the defense is fighting hardest to keep out of that courtroom is obviously, Charlie's Christian faith. Their priority is, burying what he believed, and frankly, what everyone knows he believed. What does that tell you? Not just perhaps about this defense, but about the machine behind it that spent years, basically painting Charlie as a monster for saying what he believed out loud. And perhaps more importantly, not just saying what he believed out loud, but literally opening up his microphone to his biggest detractors almost on a daily basis.
Well, look, I mean, it speaks to everything that Turning Point USA was designed and created to fight against. It speaks to the problems that we have in our country, where we've gotten to a place now where, okay, what is the modern public square if not a college campus, right? Going to a college campus to debate ideas. And that's literally what Charlie said. Come debate me. Like, if you believe that I'm wrong, or you believe that I'm incorrect, prove me wrong. Come on out here. Let's have a discussion. But he always did so with peace. He always did so in good faith. He brought two microphones, one for himself and one for anyone who wanted to come up. And Charlie's rule, and we continue this, by the way, when we go out to campus, it's always been, if you disagree, you get to come to the very front of the line. And so I think it started, honestly, and I know that, this is something obviously you're huge on. I think it started with censorship.
Yeah.
I think it started with censorship in the sense that I don't just disagree with you. I think that you're not allowed to say the things that you believe. So you get called to be censored on a college campus. You can't say that on a college campus.
Yeah, and that was the difference between Charlie and everyone else.
You shouldn't be here.
He may not believe what you're saying,
Yeah, and Charlie
but he thought you had every right to say whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
The left does not feel that way.
He never stood for that at all.
Yeah.
No. And then so think about it, though. So they lost the argument on college campuses. They lost the political power, because then along comes Donald J. Trump and wins the popular vote 7 out of 7 of the swing states. And you've got Charlie Kirk there and Turning Point USA picking up so much of the influence and going after those low prop voters, the young voters. And so you think, okay, I can't get rid of this guy on campus. I can't get rid of this guy politically. Then there's only one thing left to do. And if that's your mindset, that people need to be stopped from saying and thinking the things that they are saying, then if you become so twisted enough and so crazy enough, you might think that I've got to find other means to stop this person's speech. And that's what happened.
Yeah, and that was frankly, very evident based on the response from so many of the radical leftists in the minutes and days after Charlie's murder, the celebrating it, because, it wasn't that he was this, violent guy. It was that he was effective at dismantling the BS that they stake their entire existence on.
They couldn't defeat him in debate, so they tried to silence him with a bullet. And Charlie was always open to all comers. He was always open to travel literally everywhere in the world and to just spread his beliefs about living conservative values, living Christian values. And obviously, this is why he was targeted. But of course, because that does make it an enhancement under Utah law, that's why the defense is trying so hard to get us from talking about anything to do with Charlie's actual beliefs, because it's not that they're irrelevant to the case. They are the central part of the case.
Yeah, explain that and the stakes of that for people in plain English. The victim targeting enhancement. Why proving Charlie was targeted for his faith, keeps the death penalty on the table, essentially, I guess.
Right, exactly. So this is, and I'm, neither of us are lawyers, but we have spent time in court. So the idea here is that, look, this is what takes a murder. You can have like manslaughter, you can have crime of passion, you can have second-degree murder, first-degree murder. Okay, you have all of those things. But under Utah law, aggravated murder, if you want to get to that highest level, when I say you want to get, when I say for prosecutors to be able to bring on that highest level of punishment, that highest level of murder, it requires these things called enhancements. And one of those enhancements is, which I believe they demonstrated quite clearly, is if it's done in the presence of minor children. And obviously that was done. And there was a video that was played, and you could see this. And I should have mentioned that video was extremely emotional when they played that in the crowd, because there's two little kids. There were two little kids in the prime of their life, just one, and their mother, beautiful mom, just wanted to take them to go see Charlie Kirk speak. And then they've had their childhood now completely ripped away from them because of what they saw before their eyes just moments later. So I actually think it's really, I could go on that for hours, but I think it's really, really important that is another one of the enhancements, and that's protected in law. You destroyed their childhood and you have to pay for that. That's important. Number two, though, is this victim targeting enhancement. And this is politics or religion. And if the choice of the victim, so premeditated murder, but if it's done for politics or religion, that's another enhancement that brings it up to the highest level of capital offense. So aggravated murder with enhancements, that's what brings the death penalty into play. And, I'll just say, not revealing anything that, that I overheard specifically, but being in the courthouse, it's very, very clear that the DA's office here is going for the death penalty. They're very serious about this. This is something they are taking very seriously. They're fighting for very seriously. And there are times where, as a commentator, and also as just a friend of the family, that I want them to be going and doing more, and wanting them, maybe play for the cameras more. But there are times where their goal at the end of this is to get that conviction and to get that sentence. And so they have to play a very, very tight game to be able to get there. And this, of course, the defense knows as well. And so that's why the defense is doing everything they can to knock them off of their game. Like, for example, not allowing anything about Charlie's beliefs to come into the court.
Yeah. So, Jack, you're in that room, and then you walk out and see how, some people, are covering it. How different is what some, what the story that some people are telling from what you're actually watching and learning in real time in there?
Well, it's really interesting because, I'm there and I'm watching both sides, and I've got, two notepads now full of notes about the both sides, the prosecution and the defense. And then you go online and you see people saying things that haven't been brought up by either side. They haven't been brought up even by the people who are defending Tyler Robinson. And so, these things about what type of rifle it was or what the DNA was, the defense isn't even arguing against that. They're arguing, sure, they're questioning credibility and things like that. But, they are, it was stipulated in court that there's, again, a 95 to 89% DNA match on items that were found at the crime scene to Tyler Robinson. So basically, if you're sitting there, you've got to be able to come up with a very, very good explanation for, at this point, we have a towel, a bath towel that came from your house 3 hours away. It just magically found in the woods, wrapped around a Mauser 98, and a screwdriver that was found up on the roof next to a sniper's perch, as we just talked about, with your DNA on it, somehow magically found its way there. If you weren't the shooter, you're going to have to come up with some way to reasonably present an alternate theory as to how that happened. And that's just, when you look at these things logically, it becomes very hard to take that apart. And we haven't even gotten to the gun yet. We haven't gotten to the ATF report, which is going to be coming later in the week, the ballistics report, some of which has come out in the media, but not totally in court yet. So, I mean, these are other key pieces of information, but every single time it comes out, you just see the scales being weighed further and further and further in favor of Tyler Robinson being the shooter.
Yeah, so and I've seen a lot of this, as it relates to the gun. I know they haven't really started talking about that yet, so they'll get to that. You heard the exploding mic theory and all these things. didn't really make sense to me, especially based on videos that you see of the actual shooting. I didn't see anything sort of explode that way. The one that a lot of people, and understandably, probably seem to latch on is that that the bullet would enter a neck and not come out from a 30-06. It's a 30 caliber bullet. It's halfway between a 300 Win Mag and a 308. I know these guns well. I do a lot of hunting. I've done a lot of culling. I've taken a lot of neck shots because it preserves a lot of meat when you're hunting. I think some of that skepticism can be founded. I mean, and I would say people don't opine on a 30-06, but you can tell right away most of the people don't really know anything about guns or anything. I don't know the bullet that was used. I know it's a 30-06. That's the cartridge. Was it a frangible bullet? In which case, there's almost no chance you'd get any kind of pass through. Was it some sort of soft point? In which case it wouldn't. If it was a full metal jacket, you're more likely to get a pass through. But I've definitely shot over 100 deer in my career with neck shots, and again sometimes helping guys culling, meat hunting, managing for QDMA purposes. And if you take that neck shot, I'll say, 9, 8.5, 9 out of 10. So, let's just say blended average, 85, 90% of the time, you're going to get a pass through. That doesn't mean that it happens every time. I've seen bigger guns not get clean pass throughs. I've seen, smaller, faster bullets do it. Everything's different. You hit bone, that changes the dynamic of that very differently. So it feels like everyone's sort of latching onto this. Well, there's no way it could have been a 30-06 because you didn't get a pass through, and it's just not accurate. I'm not saying that wouldn't happen the majority of the time. I think it probably would. Again, except for if the shooter was using frangible bullets or something a really soft nose bullet designed essentially to go through the ribcage. You actually don't want a bullet when you're hunting usually to pass all the way through an animal, because that means that there's energy transferred not into the animal doing the most effective job of stopping it. You actually want that in sort of, the vital zones, doing the damage there and having, the full kinetic energy of that bullet in there. There's all sorts of ballistic arguments to be made here. We haven't heard those arguments yet. But yes, I mean, to the average person, how come I haven't addressed that is because there's too many variables I don't know yet. And
one thing, if I could add to that is, I assume you've used a tree stand before.
Yeah.
How high up are your tree stands?
Yeah, it depends on. I mean, I do a lot of mountain hunting, so you could be shooting down to 45-degree angles. I don't think this is probably 10, 15-degree angle from a rooftop of a garage. But yeah, that lengthens.
This was a pretty high angle. So yeah. I went to the campus a couple of days ago.
Okay, so I can only tell by the pictures. It's a little hard to tell.
I didn't know this until I got to the campus myself, but from where that courtyard is, which is down at the bottom of this amphitheater, and then the buildings are kind of stacked on a hill, that when you're at the top of that Losi Center looking down into the courtyard, you're like maybe 5-6 stories above where Charlie was all the way down. So it is a downward angle shot that was going in, which is, which can be, and I see some of these videos that people are doing on YouTube, and it's always like a straight horizontal shot. And it's like, well, no, but that's not what happened.
Obviously, listen, the hypotenuse of a triangle, you're going to
there's so many, there's so many different variables that I think we need to get in. And look, we were already told that, that it did fragment, and the autopsy in terms of what's been released is that it did hit bone, that it fragmented, and we also know the age of the bullet, by the way. We know it's World War II era, so it could be an older bullet, and that it was those fragments that were later recovered from Charlie. And so we do know that there was fragmentation. That's something that has come out from the ATF report.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's the thing that I get, asked a lot, just having been a, former competitive shooter and very avid hunter. I've done a lot of this, and again, I understand the skepticism, but there is not an end all be all answer. This is going to happen every time. Like I said, for me, neck shooting, deer, elk, you may not get a pass through all that often. Frankly, it's a much bigger animal, but to create something approximately the size of a human neck, and generally, if you're culling does or something like that, it's probably smaller than a human neck. And I'd say, 85% of the time you'd get a full pass through on a larger neck animal, a buck, maybe 80, but between 80 and 90. But there is that thing. And then again, not knowing what the specific bullet, meaning the actual projectile, not the cartridge. We know it's a 30-06, but people oftentimes don't know that. Those are the people that draw, the entire bullet and the casing and everything going out of the barrel of the gun. It's just not how that works. Without knowing that.
And everything's an AR-15.
Well, when an AR-15 can blow a hole this big into the side of a school bus, it's like, frankly, AR-15, the 223, 5.56 round. In many states, it's not even legal to hunt deer with because they don't think it has enough stopping power. So, there's a lot of noise out there about the gun. I get it in here. Don't you know? I was like, no, dude, I know. And like I said, 85% of the time, you're probably going to get a pass through. You hit bone, frangible bullets, extra soft points, older ammunition. There is just a lot that can happen. This is not one of those things that's an absolute, unfortunately. I believe Martin Luther King was killed with a 30-06, and there wasn't a pass through either.
That's right. The phrase I always hear from like soft guys and guys in that world is that bullets do weird things.
Yeah, they do. They do. So it's just one of those things that keeps coming up. People like, you haven't addressed it. It's like, well, I don't have the information because I don't know what the projectile actually was, meaning the specific bullet coming out of a 30-06 case. Again, a frangible bullet, 9 times out of 10, it wouldn't pass through. It may not, maybe even less than that. It could just blow up on the spot. I don't know what he was using. I don't know what his capabilities were. I can't opine on that, but I wanted to make sure to address it, at least in some detail here, because it's one of those facts that everyone's just latching onto, like, it had to be a guy with a suppressed round, or, you've heard the air gun theories. It's like, I've shot large caliber air guns. Like, you would have heard the noise. Like, it's not poof. Large caliber air guns are damn loud. Someone else would have heard that. They would have picked up the report on any one of these videos. To me, didn't sound like a handgun. There's a very distinct difference between, a rifle shot sound and a handgun shot sound on a range. To me, in the audio of the shooting, very distinctly to me, a rifle. Doesn't mean I'm 100% right. Maybe the speaker was turned to a different way, but you add up enough of these things, and again, I think you certainly get the probable cause here, that this is what it is. But I don't want to skirt the issue because it keeps coming up, and depending on where you're talking, you're getting a very different level of response.
Don, to our point, right? This is why we want things like the ATF report to be released to the public completely, and the ballistics report, and yes, unfortunately, the autopsy as well. Because if we have more information, then you and I don't have to play these guessing games, and we could put something together and say, oh, okay, so it was this way, and then this happened, and here's how it went. And so the prosecution has been trying to get this evidence out, but it's been the defense that's delaying it every single time. So to your point, here's something that people are talking about online, but it hasn't even come up in the court yet because they're not letting it in.
Yeah, so I think that's important. So hopefully we'll get to all of that information tomorrow. And I just want to get to the truth. I want to find it out. I want to know this for a fact. To me, based on what I've seen, unless something seriously changes in the next couple of days, I certainly, in my mind, would have enough to go probable cause that this was it. And then you have all the extenuating circumstances that we've talked about, whether it's the lover, the text messages, the parents turning them in, the Discord chats. It just seems to get me to the point where, like, this is literally almost without fail the most plausible scenario. And so, again, I know that pisses off a lot of people. I've loved you forever. And the fact that you didn't jump onto that, it was aliens from, another planet that did this. I'm sorry to disappoint you guys, but like, I owe it to my friend to be honest. And, I would never lie about it for any reason or change my opinion or otherwise for that. I think we all owe it to Charlie and to his legacy to get justice for him.
Yeah, and there's no question, and beyond that, it's like I'm not trying to win a debate online right now.
Yeah.
I just want justice for Charlie. So people can say whatever they want to say, and that's fine, and you should, and I'm not discounting anything anyone says, but I am also going to look at the evidence. And I'm going to say, well, if this is what the evidence, and by the way, I remember when people said that about Derek Chauvin too. For years, people told me Derek Chauvin is a murderer. Derek Chauvin is this terrible guy. And then when I looked at the case and I said, well, wait a minute, I just don't think this evidence matches up with what they're saying. Now, the jury did what they did there, and I think that was incredibly politicized. But again, that was something where it was very unpopular for me to say that from the very start, that I didn't think that what Derek Chauvin did was murder. And people on both sides of the aisle really came after me. And now here we are a couple years later, emotions have died down, and people are starting to look at that saying, that may have actually been political. So, I mean, I just
well,
mean
and
to
by the way,
say
you mentioned earlier, Kyle
I'm just
Rittenhouse
going to
the
follow
same
the
thing.
evidence.
Kyle Rittenhouse the same thing. I mean,
Kyle Rittenhouse, yeah,
it was done. It was this. It was actually Bill Ackman, who was certainly a very big leftist at the time. Who put out this really, he's sort of known for putting out these long and detailed tweets, and I was. And he put out this tweet being like, wait a minute, I've been watching the trial, actually watching, and the evidence presented against Kyle Rittenhouse, and I thought he was a white supremacist, but he killed a white pedophile and another guy that was attacking him with a skateboard, and he was there, and he goes, and this is a big business guy, he's a big hedge fund guy, he's there, and he goes, it's sort of interesting. So I'm watching the trial with my wife, and we're saying, wait a minute, this is so different than everything we thought we knew about the case, and he goes, it reminds me sort of like when I read the Wall Street Journal about some deal, and I'm on the deal. I'm on one side of the transaction, or I know the guys that are.
I remember this
and,
tweet
and,
now.
and I read the article, I go, this is BS. This is nonsense. I was in the room. I know exactly what. But then I turn the page to something where I'm not a subject matter expert on, and I read it like it's the gospel. And it's not. And I think it's one of these things where, I'm not saying he's changed his political beliefs. He was a huge Democrat funder, but it was the first time you saw someone from that side come out and be like, oh, you mean because I read it in the press doesn't mean it's true. So, actually seeing the evidence, is so critical. So for, the people, who get it, great. For the people who are hating on it, I understand. And, trust me, I've been 95% on the conspiracy side of most of these things. But, the people, there's people out there saying, you were complicit. I was in France, when it happened. I got the call, it was midnight when I'm like, somehow I'm complicit and Erica's complicit and everyone's complicit. It's sort of sad and disgusting how far some of that's gone. And again, I can understand people being skeptical and wanting to get to the bottom of it, but some of what I've seen out there is pretty outlandish. And again, that's coming from me, who has I think pretty solid bona fides in terms of going all in for conspiracy theories that I truly believe were conspiracy theories that turned out to be right. Now, maybe I'll be proven wrong. This one does not seem like it's going to be one of those to me.
Yeah, sometimes the trans community is just kills people. That's something that we've seen
quite often, actually,
quite a few times. Certainly on college, it's quite too often, obviously. And school campuses, college campuses, that is a place where they are known to commit violence. So it's not like this isn't something that we've seen play out a number of times in the past. It's just that we haven't seen it on such a high profile level. But if the facts go where they go, then we owe it to Charlie to follow them there.
I agree 100%. So, Jack, I know you're going to be there for the rest of the week. Can you tell people how you're covering the rest of this hearing, where they can follow your reporting as the trial moves forward, so they can, again, not hear the spin from other people, but hear literally what's being presented, day in and day out?
Well, thank you so much. And that's right. We're going to be here all the rest of this week. I'm at Human Events Daily on Real America's Voice. You can watch on Rumble. We're going to be doing sort of like a late night wrap up stream, which I actually am starting in 10 minutes here. So I am not leaving. I think I'm going to start it over there, actually. A bit of a 2 studio thing. And, we're doing that every night. I am doing intermittently when I can some hits from the courthouse as well, or we'll go outside. We have a camera set up there, so I'll be doing those throughout the day when I can. And I hope that people just watch the hearings. That's all I would ask. I would say to people, look, if you have questions, if you're skeptical, I get it totally. Just watch the hearings. That's why we fought so hard to get them televised.
I agree, John. By the way, one more point. I think that, I asked you about what was most shocking to you. I think one of the things that was perhaps most shocking to me in all of this was finding out that for a turning point event, thousands of people in attendance, that there were only 6 police officers on duty at the university for, you know, what would probably be a really big event for, you know, Utah Valley University. That to me is, you know, one of the craziest things I've heard in all of this. I mean, 6 events, no prior briefing, no real plan. That to me was the scariest thing I've seen all week, actually.
Yeah, you know, I remember when I first got that information, you know, a couple days afterwards, and you know, it's one of those things that I'm never going to stop being angry about that. I'm never going to stop being angry about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you know, as someone who's done a lot of these events with Charlie, and I was supposed to do one, you know, 2 or 3 weeks after this event, it's like, wow, it made it all the, you know, so much more real. And yeah, now I still can't believe it. But Jack, thanks for everything you're doing, man. Really appreciate it. You know, like me, I'm sure we'll take a lot of heat for just laying out what we saw with our own eyes. But I think that needs to be done. And I really appreciate it as always, buddy.
Well, and God bless to you and to Bettina for making the time to come out. I know it's not easy, and it's certainly not fun sitting there in the courtroom, but I think it was really, really important for not just the family, but for the whole country to be able to see you guys there.
Well, thanks again, man. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all the reporting. Thanks for being there for Charlie. And guys, before we go, Erica, Kathy, Rob, you know, they're in that front row every single day. They're facing this with incredible grace that honestly humbles me, that they're able to keep their composure as well as they have. Keep them in your prayers this week and until we get resolution to this heinous crime. We're going to stay on the case, you know, every step of the way, through the hearing, through the trial. Charlie deserves that. His family deserves that, and justice is coming. So, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Sorry about the scheduling stuff, but I thought it was more important for me just to be there to support my friend, his memory, you know, his wife and family. So I couldn't do the show on Monday. I was still in courtroom when I'd normally be going live. But, you know, remember to like, share, to subscribe. Get this out there so people actually see what's going on. We really appreciate that. Check out our sponsors down below in the video description. You can go to donjuniorgold.com to learn more. And guys, with that, I just want to say thank you. And I guess I'll talk to you all again very soon, probably tomorrow, actually, because we'd normally be live on Thursday. So again, apologize for the break in the schedule, but, you know, get it out there. We really appreciate it. Have a good one.